Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. Hope you're having a good one. It is cold and snow still on the ground here where we are. I think it's going to be around for a while. I don't think it's going to melt anytime soon. I'll have to look at the long-term forecast, but all signs right now pointing to a definite cold white Christmas here in our neck of the woods. We've got a lot from Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua today. Jesse Steyer's first show of the week. You're just down in the dumps, huh, little fella? Like all things football. Notre Dame fan, obviously. Things not working out for you right now, football wise, are they? It's kind of like back to the start of the season. We had that stretch where 3 consecutive weeks, I think it turned out, Notre Dame, the Chicago Bears, and the Dallas Cowboys all won. And then all at once, the wheels just fell off of everything. Thursday night, you were there in Detroit. Things didn't go well for the Bears on Sunday. And obviously, things didn't go well for Notre Dame selection-wise on Sunday either. So here we are, just grousing in our little football pity pool.
You could throw the Colts in there, too, if you want, with, them potentially going to a 44-year-old.
I don't have a Colts fan in my house. I have a Bears fan in my house. Not you, not me, but there is a Bears fan in there. So yeah.
Not to be dramatic, but I realized the real reason I'm sad is football is no longer a thing for me anymore this season, rooting interest wise.
It's no longer a thing. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. It's almost
are out.
We like the season has ended kind of the way it began. Like I remember after Notre Dame's first couple of weeks and the first couple of weeks of the NFL season, watching the Cowboys as well. And again, like Bears fans, you can lump this in there, but I'm just like, there was not that much enjoyable football I was watching at the start of the season. And now Sean Kelly chiming in the YouTube chat, like he says, I still can't fathom the season is over. Still seems like a nightmare. He put an LOL at the end, but I would just take the LOL out because it does seem like a nightmare. We all went into Sunday. Notre Dame obviously went into Sunday thinking that they were going to be like in really good shape to be in the college football playoff, the way things worked out on Saturday in the conference championship games. Like all signs were pointing to yes, but the rug was definitely pulled out from under a lot of people, namely Marcus Freeman and the team and the university, but fans obviously as well. And even like us sitting here talking about it, really pulled out from underneath us as well. It's like you're making plans. It's okay. We got all this stuff we're going to talk about over the next month, at least month. And then it's just all gone. And now we've got Pete Bevacqua radio interviews and press conferences to talk about. Not quite the same. I'm sorry.
No, not quite the same. Not quite the same level as enthusiasm either. But, as they say, the show goes on. I am already, rooting for 2026 Notre Dame. I want 2026 Notre Dame to have a grudge and really just see red the entire season. So really looking forward to that. But I think the other really unfortunate part about all this is, everyone knows when you're a Notre Dame fan, right? And so just and then you combine social media.
You're getting it from all your friends, and
you can't unsee it anywhere right now.
Well, and that's the thing I was saying over the weekend. I just want this weekend to be over because I was tired of the whole Notre Dame, Miami back and forth, and it was just everywhere from both fans and the media and just all the beep, 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 just everywhere. And obviously, the whole conversation is just shifted to something else. Notre Dame is still taking up all the oxygen in the room. It's just that the conversation and the talking points are different right now with basically, everyone who's not a Notre Dame fan or, around the country just directing all their daggers right at Notre Dame. A lot of venom coming Notre Dame's way right now.
Yeah, a huge amount of venom. And then I've got people sending me, the Pop-Tart guy holding a meme or a sign that says Notre Dame is too soft to play in the Pop-Tart Bowl. So it's never ending, it feels like. But again, hopefully a week from now, 2 weeks from now, the sports world has moved on. We can no longer have to sit here and argue and debate about this. And I'm sure I'll watch, some of these playoff games and the rest of the football that's to come.
All right. Well, we're going to get into some of these comments from Pete Bevacqua. Since you brought up Pop-Tarts Bowl, that's one of the things that he talked about. The majority of the questions at the press conference today were about the ACC relationship. We're going to get into that. But I mean, a lot of people overreacted, overreached yesterday after, everything was announced on Sunday. And, I think that there were a lot of Notre Dame fans who thought that some major announcement was coming at Pete Bevacqua's press conference today after that was announced. And so let's get a couple things out of the way. If you haven't heard or seen or watched or whatever the press conference, no, Pete Bevacqua did not announce that Notre Dame is leaving the ACC. That is not imminent. Although I don't doubt that it could happen in the relatively near future. I don't think, we know it's not happening now. And no, Pete Bevacqua did also not announce anything related to a Marcus Freeman contract extension, though he did talk about Marcus Freeman today. You look like you were getting ready to say something there.
No, I was just reading some of these funny comments in the chat that are no Bulls, no playoffs. They are on strike.
There's a lot of people obviously justifiably mad at ESPN. So if you want to boycott ESPN, I think you've got every right to, if you're a Notre Dame fan at this point. And if you don't, so if you don't want to watch, what of any of ESPN's programming, even you couldn't even watch another game without the play-by-play announcer and the analyst jumping into a Notre Dame Miami debate, right? And it wasn't even a Notre Dame game, like we talked about it. Bob was choosing, and whoever his play-by-play partner was, I guess it was a Miami game, but it was, the Pitt Miami game. They were jumping into the whole thing. And just it didn't matter what game you were watching for the most part, that's where the conversation would steer most of the time. So if you're a Notre Dame fan and you're sitting here where you are right now, you've got a right to be mad about that whole thing and not want to help ESPN or Disney pay their bills at this point. Completely understand that if that's your on it. And my interest in the play, do I want to see Ole Miss and Tulane? Wow, that's high on my list. And by the way, good luck with viewership. Good luck with viewership on that Miami Texas A&M and noon game on Saturday, December 20th. Good luck with that one. Good luck with your ratings there. Noon, 11 a.m. in Texas, that sucker's going to kick off. Enjoy college football world. Okay, so Marcus Freeman's name has popped up. It popped up last year in NFL circles. It popped up this year in, whenever the Penn State job, whatever job, Florida, LSU, when those jobs came open, Marcus Freeman's name was popping up, and it's popped up in the NFL cycle now as well, just as recently as, I think, yesterday, Mike Vrabel, if it was either yesterday or the day before, Vrabel, the New England Patriots head coach, was talking about him. So Pete Bevacqua was asked about that and making sure that Freeman remains happy at Notre Dame. And here's what Pete Bevacqua had to say at his press conference earlier today.
I would never say we wouldn't match anything when it comes to Marcus. Everybody has eyes on Marcus. College has eyes on Marcus. NFL has eyes on Marcus. I bet Hollywood has eyes on Marcus, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the next, Leo DiCaprio movie with Martin Scorsese. Marcus is Marcus. All the credit to him. He deserves it. He's the absolute best coach in the country for Notre Dame, full stop. He's one of the greatest college coaches in the country. And people forget how young he is. So I get it. And that's a compliment to him and his success and the way he represents himself and the way he prepares and who he is and how he talks. It's one of my main obligations and responsibilities to this university is to make sure Marcus wakes up every day knowing that he is supported and valued by Notre Dame. And I can say with 100% certainty he feels that way. And Notre Dame is totally aligned around the importance of college football for Notre Dame. We're totally aligned on how he is the perfect coach for Notre Dame. And he's as I like to say, it's tough to say he's more than the Notre Dame football coach, because being the Notre Dame football coach means so much, but he's more than the Notre Dame football coach. He's part of this university. He's part of the fabric of this university. So's Joanna. So are his kids. He's everywhere. He's at, as you've heard me say before, he's at soccer games, women's and men's basketball games, hockey games, talking to students. He's an amazing individual and an amazing leader, and we feel blessed that he's our coach. I make sure that he knows that he will be where he deserves to be, and that is at the top tier of college football coaches when it comes to compensation every year. I view his contract, although a multi-year contract, as a living, breathing document that we will revise every year as need be to make sure he's where he deserves to be. He knows he has that commitment from me and more importantly, from the university.
Man, I tell you what, someone needs to be arrested for the assault they were doing on their keyboard during that press conference. Just starting off with that, I think I know who it was, because if it's who I think it is, I sit fairly close to him in the press box. It's like, man, like how did that keyboard survive? He was just drilling that thing. I think he talked for a long time there. I think the most important thing were the first words out of his mouth, that he's, never say that we wouldn't match any offer that comes Marcus Freeman's way. Is that satisfactory, or did you need to hear more from Pete Bevacqua on the subject?
That was a masterclass response, and I think that the one thing that really caught my attention was when he started to go into his contract is a living, breathing document, meaning every year they are reevaluating that sucker, and every year it's to me, it's adaptable to what else is going on in the rest of college football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lane Kiffin is going to reset the market here with this LSU deal. If Marcus Freeman feels like he's not getting something maybe that Lane Kiffin is too, not to say that they need to match everything that's going around, but you can stay up to date contractually, with ways that I think that, some of the money is broken up, the way the NIL fund is broken up, etc. Like the finer details, I appreciate that those things aren't just set in stone in 4 years and then, okay, no matter what, we're only going to look at it again in those 4 years when the contract is coming up. So to hear that it is constantly changing, it's a breathing document, I think that's the most important part that I heard.
The fact that they're keeping it open, and look, there is always going to be interest in Marcus Freeman. So I think you do have to stay flexible and, just continue to evaluate how things are going. And look at what they did. Gosh, it's almost been a week now already, a week ago tomorrow, with the signing class that they had in 2026, all 27 guys signing on the dotted line, no decommitments. And, 24 of those guys, I think was the number, are going to early enroll next month and be here this spring. And, so everything is pointing in Marcus Freeman's direction. And there's going to continue to be a lot of interest. And when you look at the kind of personality that he has, I think it's definitely a perfect fit for the NFL and today's modern professional athlete. But I think it is also the perfect fit for today's modern college athlete. And when you see the way that guys on Notre Dame's roster respond to him, that's a big, and obviously the success as well. But that's a big part of why there is so much continued interest in Marcus Freeman, both from the NFL and from other top tier college football programs. So the bowl game, everyone's crazy about the bowl game. We're bent out of shape about Notre Dame skipping out on eating some Pop-Tarts at the Pop-Tart Bowl and watching that funny little guy jump out of the toaster at the end. I wonder what the reaction would be if it wasn't actually the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but it was the Pop-Tarts Bowl. But the question came up today: would Notre Dame have played in a bowl game this year if the rug was not pulled out from underneath them the way it was on Sunday during the selection show? And here's Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua's answer to that.
The team making the decision not to play in this year's bowl was a decision solely isolated to this year. We can't speak for future years. We can't speak for what the captains on the team feel like, the nature of a season. Maybe you started the season strong and then fell off, and here's a way to turn the corner and reignite momentum and springboard you into the next year. Maybe one year you have an unbelievably young team and you want to kind of start that maturation process for the next year. But this year, this was a team that had national championship aspirations. This was a team that was unbelievably close-knit. And in the crazy world of major college football emotions, you find out you're not in the CFP and you're shocked. And then you get a call, hey, do you want to go play in this bowl game? And so Marcus places a ton of emphasis on the roles of the captains of the team. You saw that if you're watching the Peacock documentary. These aren't just, the letter C pasted onto a jersey and kind of a pat on the back. They have a real role in our team and in the decisions the team makes week in and week out. He relies on those captains and really treats them as a key element of the decision-making process, bounces things off of them. How's the team feeling? What are we thinking? I think his relationship with the team, but particularly with the captains, is magical. So what he did is he reached out to the captains and said, hey, listen, yeah, this is rough, but let's not make an emotional decision. Let's make a smart decision. Let's take a deep breath. Now, granted, you don't have a week to take a deep breath. You don't have 24 hours to take a deep breath. You have a couple of hours, but settle down, reload, as he says, and let's think about this. Talk about it with each other. Get a sense of how the team feels, And the unanimous message that came back was, we are such a close team, those guys in that locker room, that they wanted to make sure that the last team that took the field as part of the 2025 Notre Dame team was the same team that took the field when we got off the plane in Miami. They didn't feel it was right for this team to make the decision to go out there and not be that full team that has been so close together. That's going to have a great event here in town just to kind of let their hair down tomorrow. That was the decision. And it was a decision that I applaud. And I think it was a hard decision. I think they knew it was going to be a hard decision. I think they knew it was going to be a decision that not everybody was going to love. But it was the right decision for this team at this moment. I'm positive of that. And does that mean that if we're in this situation again in the future, that the same decision would be made? No. It's year by year, case by case. It was the right decision for this team at this moment.
Right decision for this team at this moment. And I think that most Notre Dame fans are behind it. There's definitely some who would want them to be in the bowl if just for the 15 practices and that kind of thing. So is the explanation there good enough for you? Like, do you like that? Where do you stand on this? Vince and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but you haven't had a chance to talk about it so far.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame has every right to come together as a team and make the decision that they want to make, considering, what kind of transpired definitely on Sunday and the 4 or 5 weeks leading up to Sunday. So I think that there was an obvious point that, a lot of the guys on offense would probably opt out between Eli Raridan, Emil Wagner, Malachi Fields. You don't have you don't have Greathouse. You're not going to have your running backs. So to me, I think that they were disappointed because the team that they wanted to put on the field was a team that they thought was gearing up and preparing for battle for a national championship.
Right.
And I think when you mentally and you're physically in one spot, and like Pete Bevacqua talked about, how close they were as a team, wanting to play together as a team, wanting to go out and dominate as a team. I think they felt like, they would do themselves a disservice. College football, the world would kind of be at a disservice because they wouldn't get the Notre Dame team that was preparing to go on a playoff run.
That's exactly right. It would have been similar Not
And
quite
then
the
they would
same.
have been judged on how they performed as well,
Exactly.
obviously.
Exactly. And I don't know how much of that came into play Sunday afternoon when they had to make the decision in a relatively short amount of time, which Pete Bevacqua talked about on the Dan Patrick show yesterday, a little bit more like that they had to make that decision relatively quickly. And the captains, came to a consensus and said, no, we want to go with our team. But it would have been a completely different team, both, for like those guys playing with them and for whatever product that you end up putting out there on the field. Now, I still think the Notre Dame team would have been better than most other teams that they were going to face in these bowl games because the best of the best, with the exception of the two group of 5 teams, are playing in the college football playoff. But so I still think Notre Dame's depth would have shown through against whoever they were playing. But I completely understand. It's like you've been telling us for 5 weeks that we were going to be in the college football playoff. We were ranked number 10 last week. You moved us down, even though, we've been winning and we've been doing our thing. We've held up our end of the bargain, and everything that you've told us is we're on track to be in the college football playoff. And then they literally just pulled the rug out from underneath them. And I can understand that disappointment. And I can understand not wanting to go out there and play with the group that you didn't think was necessarily going to, to show your best out there on the field, and to do it in the Pop-Tarts Bowl as well. Like, you think that's not a big step down, going from a freaking college football playoff game and playing in the national championship game last year and swinging that around this year and thinking that you're going to be in the playoff, and all of a sudden now you're in some JV bowl game, and just because, again, the mascot happens to pop out of a, giant toaster, everyone's supposed to put smiles on their face and be happy about that experience. Nobody cares about that. So like all these people nationally who are throwing their darts at Notre Dame, like, you take care of your business. Notre Dame is taking care of its business. Like there are plenty of other teams that are opting out of these bowls as well. And as Joe said in the YouTube chat, no one's taking shots at them. It's only Notre Dame that people are taking shots at right now. Like, what does Notre Dame have to show you that they didn't show you when they were at their best for 14 weeks? Because, factoring in the buys, or 12 games. What does Notre Dame have to show you right now that's going to prove anybody right or wrong or indifferent about, because of what they're going to do in some sub-tier bowl game? I think the payout is like $6 million, which is, once you factor in travel party and all that stuff. And again, there are ticket allotments that teams are required to buy, all these different things. It ain't free to go to a bowl game. Teams actually have to pay to be part of it. And then you have to hope that you sell your ticket allotment. And again, I don't, the bowl game wants Notre Dame because they think Notre Dame is going to put butts in the seats. Like, as a Notre Dame fan, John says he would have gone to the Pop-Tart Bowl. I wonder how many fans would have gone to a Pop-Tart Bowl, though, and bought a ticket for $200+. I'm just guessing, that's probably the minimum, $200+ to go to the Pop-Tarts Bowl to watch Notre Dame. Like, would you shell out that kind of money and travel and go through all that to watch Notre Dame in the Pop-Tarts Bowl after you thought they were going to be in the college football playoff? I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't go pay to see that. And I think this is, you were very on point there, but to kind of add a little bit more to it, to me, this is why I'm so frustrated. It's like, now everyone gets to take their blatant open shots at Notre Dame on a national stage because the committee set them up to fail on a national stage. So now everyone gets to make fun of them publicly. Now we get to question about Notre Dame's, strength of schedule. We get to question Notre Dame's softness because they don't want to go play in a bowl game. Like Pete Bevacqua said, Notre Dame beat their opponents by an average of like 30 points over the last 4 or 5 games. They were dominating. They were rolling. They weren't given the excuse of beating, a 5-7 rival Auburn by 3 points as a reason why to, suddenly move up. And so that's the part that's so annoying, is this is just a national stage now. Everyone has their opinions. And if you've been a lifelong Notre Dame hater, you can come out of the woodworks, open up these wounds that everyone has already disproven about the strength of schedule, about having to be in a conference, this and that, everything that everyone loves to make fun of.
The narrative in that bowl game during the broadcast would have gone right back to this team thought they were going to be in the college football playoff, and you would have heard that stuff all over again. That's exactly right. John says, why would Notre Dame turn down $6 million? Well, again, it's not just straight up $6 million. There is still travel expenses that are involved with all the extra people who go to bowl games. Like $6 million is probably a break-even profit. It's a break-even situation. You're not going to turn a profit with a $6 million payout by the time you go through all the travel and, again, ticket guarantees, because Notre Dame, they would make them purchase, the bowl would make Notre Dame purchase probably at least 20 to 25,000 tickets would be my guess in that ballpark. So Notre Dame has to buy those tickets, and then it's up to Notre Dame to sell them to their fan base. And if Notre Dame doesn't sell the whole ticket allotment, guess who gets stuck with that bill? Notre Dame. It's not the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but the Pop-Tarts Bowl wants to cry because Notre Dame's not coming to the bowl game when they're not taking on the financial end of the deal. Like all these little local chambers of commerce and everything else, it's like, oh, we get Notre Dame. Like, yeah, you get Notre Dame without any of the work that goes into it and, without anything else that comes with it. So it sounds great, and everyone wants to, again, come at Notre Dame about not going, but I've got no problem with them turning down this bowl game.
Yeah, and I think another part of this is Notre Dame can now breathe and get healthy. Like think of the last calendar year that Notre Dame has had, national championship deep run, starting early in the season, all the travel they do because they don't play in a conference. It's like, I feel like this is a good time for Notre Dame to kind of reset, get a lot of these guys healthy. A lot of people complain about the 15 practices. The good thing about Notre Dame the last few years is their young guys are playing, those
right.
extra practices in spring ball, that's for guys who need to learn the playbook or true freshmen. Notre Dame has so much depth right now that those extra practices and snaps that everyone wants to talk about, it's like they already have the depth. They have guys ranging through the depth chart playing. I'd rather see them get healthy, cut the cord, and just move on to 2026.
I agree. I totally agree. G Live in the YouTube chat says it's a little less than 3 million per team, so a total of 6 million. The number I saw was just 6 million. But yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then it's even less. That like $3 million as a payout for the school, you're going to lose money on that. You're not making any money at all if your cut is only $3 million for going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl or any other bowl game. We'll take a timeout. More Pete Bevacqua comments coming up next. We're going to get into some of the ACC stuff. He talked about ACC damage on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and a lot of ACC talk came up at his press conference today from the social media campaign that the ACC waged and more. That is on the way. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Tuesday show. Rapid fire coming up in hour number 2. A lot of different topics we're going to get to, including Jeremiah Love, Marcus Burton. We got a little men's basketball to talk about today. They've got a game coming up tomorrow, but we continue to talk about some of the comments from Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua's press conference today. Bevacqua went on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and he said that the ACC has damaged the relationship with Notre Dame after they actively campaigned against the Irish over the last few weeks. And Bevacqua was asked today what that damage is.
We felt this was different, and it raised a lot of eyebrows. And, you know, we made our feelings known that we didn't particularly understand this. And it just kind of puzzled us that a conference that's home to over 600 of our student athletes walking around this campus today, I guess, chose to go down that road. I guess intellectually I understand it, but I certainly don't agree with it. And why would you attack an unbelievably important business partner of yours in football and a member of your conference in 24 other sports? I'm one person. I don't see the logic in that. I know other leaders at the university didn't see the logic in that. And the ACC is important to us, and, you know, we're important to the ACC. And think about football for a minute. You know, those ACC teams want to play us in football. You know, interesting stat, since 2014, when we started our football relationship with the ACC, if you look at stadiums, they sell out, ACC games sell out roughly 23% of the time. When Notre Dame goes to an ACC site, it's 90% of the time. When you think about ratings for ACC football games when they play Notre Dame, there's a tremendous lift. I don't understand why you would go on a social media campaign to attack an important partner. You know, well, who's some of our important partners in the football space? NBC. We wouldn't do that to NBC. Now, I understand they have to stand up for their teams in football. We just think there's other ways to do it. And it has created damage. I mean, I'm not going to shy away from that. And that's just not me speaking. People a lot more important at this university than me feel the same way. So I think it has done some real damage, and I think the ACC knows that.
You know, and I see a lot of national people talking about this, you know, like why, you know, like again, taking shots at Notre Dame for being upset, you know, like, well, why would you be upset? The ACC is advocating for its schools. Well, Notre Dame still has, like, outside of anyone else in college football, Notre Dame has the closest relationship with the ACC, because even though they're not a full-fledged member in football, they've got this scheduling agreement where they're playing 5 teams a year. And as he said, it's not just football. It's also the fact that all of your other sports, with the exception of hockey, are ACC members. They are full members of the conference. And all of that, you know, like, so all of that matters. You know, it's not like you're just taking shots at some random other team like Alabama or whoever it happens to be. You're basically, you know, like, it's, I don't want to say little brother, but it's still part of the family, whether it's a cousin or an uncle or whatever it happens to be. They're still part of the family. And, you know, like the numbers that he spit out there, about 23% sellouts when it's not a Notre Dame game, 90% sellouts when it is a Notre Dame game. Like, that happened at the Miami game. I remember Miami staff inside the press box talking about, oh man, people are actually at this game, because they don't typically sell out home games. The great University of Miami Hurricane football program, but Notre Dame was there, and so it was a big deal. And it's not just football either. It's all those other sports. They all get attendance spikes for basketball, you know, when Notre Dame comes to town and plays them in these other sports. Not to mention the fact that Notre Dame is literally part of their TV package with ESPN. The value of that ESPN TV contract and the distribution, from the grant of rights that all these ACC members get, is in part due to the fact that Notre Dame is attached to it. Just like if Notre Dame was not involved with it, the ACC network, which they use to spin against Notre Dame by televising the Notre Dame-Miami football game 13 times on a loop, that network would not even exist if Notre Dame was not part of the ACC.
Yeah. I don't know what else to really
Sorry,
add
I
to
didn't
that.
mean to steal everything from you before you got a chance to talk.
So I think, when talking about the damage that's been done here, it's just really ignorant on behalf of the ACC and the rest of the world, because, again, the rest of the world doesn't understand everything you just outlined. On a surface level, they're like, well, Notre Dame's not part of the ACC in football, so why should the ACC care? And it's like, okay, why don't you dig a little bit deeper than that, you knucklehead, and why don't you realize that, yes, Notre Dame is not part of it football-wise, but it is every other
televise the
sport.
Notre Dame-Stanford game at 10:30 because, it's on ESPN and because Notre Dame is part of that contract and Stanford is in the ACC now. All these other road games, whether it's Boston, whoever it is, any of those ACC games when they're on the road end up on one of the Disney platforms, whether it's ESPN or ABC. And it's because Notre Dame is part of that ACC TV contract and they are playing ACC teams. They're getting, they're getting something back. They're all getting something back from Notre Dame being part of it that they wouldn't get if Notre Dame wasn't part of it.
Yeah, so it's just super, super childish on the behalf of the ACC to basically team up with everyone over at ESPN to really just kind of bully Notre Dame the whole last week of college football, because that's what it was. Like you said, no matter what college football game you were watching on Saturday, everyone cut to their opinion of Notre Dame and Miami. They throw the graphic up on the board or on the screen of all of them. And then I think the part that's most annoying, and this has just, been cutting at me, is throughout the entire, because I watch all the ESPN college game day shows. Every time they would talk about Notre Dame, what would Nick Saban say? This is one of the best teams in the country, one of the best offenses, one of the best defenses. And then suddenly the last week, all of a sudden the narrative changes and Nick Saban's no longer going up on a pedestal.
That's right.
Using his football brain, talking about how good Notre Dame is. It's not a coincidence that before the rankings came out, before all these guys they kept saying the same points, and then Yurachek just regurgitated everything that was said. So it's just, I lost a lot of respect for Nick Saban because he knows what he did in that situation. He talked about how great of a team Notre Dame was all season, and then magically in the last week, he's pulling all these. Notre Dame got their butt kicked by Miami on the road. You weren't saying that. You weren't saying that.
That's exactly right. Literally from one week to the next, his whole talking points changed. Everything switched from one week to the next.
And so for the ACC to jump on board with that and just tag team Notre Dame along with ESPN, they knew what they were doing. And Pete Bevacqua and the rest of Notre Dame has every right to be pissed because they're an ACC member too.
That's right.
And they're the top dog in the ACC. Like they're the premier customer.
Notre Dame is part of the ACC's bowl distribution as well. Like the reason Notre Dame could have gone to the Pop-Tarts Bowl is because of Notre Dame's affiliation with the ACC and the ACC's tie-in with the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Like it's all one and the same. You can't separate them. Just because Notre Dame is not a full-fledged football conference member, Notre Dame is intertwined with the ACC like no other school outside of the conference, because again, all of the other sports, with the exception of hockey and football, are part of the ACC. It's just baffling that people don't seem to understand that. Like that they criticize Notre Dame for one, for playing the schedule that they do, and that, well, you're playing all these ACC teams. Well, that's because of Notre Dame's contract with the ACC. And that's not even to mention the fact that, like Notre Dame signs this long-term deal with Clemson, and the ACC doesn't want to count that as one of the allotment. They want that to be separate. So they still want those other 5 games plus the Clemson game, unless Clemson was already scheduled in there. So the ACC obviously wants its cake and be able to eat it too. It's not just Notre Dame, which everyone says Notre Dame wants its cake and, wants to have its cake and eat it too. So it's just nuts. We're going to talk specifically about the social media stuff that the ACC was doing. We'll hear Pete Bevacqua's comments on that and a little nugget that I heard along the way yesterday as well. I will share that. Coming up next, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com continues. I'm Sean Stiers. Jesse Stiers with me today. Plenty of Notre Dame football, just Notre Dame in general, to talk about. Pete Bevacqua's press conference earlier today over at Notre Dame. We've got rapid fire coming up in hour number 2. Wanted to get at least one more of these comments from Pete Bevacqua from his press conference in today here in the first hour of the show. He talked about the ACC's social media approach as they were going after Notre Dame and, basically discrediting Notre Dame's case versus Miami's case. Here's what Pete Bevacqua said about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the exact timeline in front of me, so I'll give you generalities about the timing of it. I think it was like a 3.5 week campaign. Saw the first social media post, and my gut reaction was somebody in their social media department got over their skis and did something that the ACC was going to correct. And quite frankly, I was kind of expecting a phone call saying, hey, sorry about that. It won't happen again. But then it did happen again. And we started to communicate with the ACC, texts that I sent, emails that I sent, and it continued to happen. And I had a conversation, I had a phone call with Jimmy a week ago today saying, hey, listen, that's a conversation I want to keep between me and Jimmy, but certainly got the point across that this was raised eyebrows and you got to know it's caused damage here between the university and the ACC.
Jimmy, of course, being Jim Phillips, current ACC commissioner that Pete Bevacqua is referring to. So I don't know. Phillips tried to deny the other day that the ACC ever actively campaigned against Notre Dame. It seems, pretty ludicrous. Like, do you think he actually looked at any of the social media posts to try to say that?
I think the part that is the most damning is Pete Bevacqua just said, hey, early on, I emailed, we had a phone conversation, and nothing changed. So clearly the ACC didn't care, and clearly Jim Phillips was aware of how Notre Dame and Pete Bevacqua was feeling and still decided that they were just going to do whatever they wanted and continue this active campaign. So, I've just lost a lot of respect for the ACC in this situation. And I think my jealous side is coming out when I say also, like, Mario Cristobal in Miami has really pissed me off just listening to him. Like, he was on the Kirk Herbstreit podcast the day after the selection committee show. Do you think that's a coincidence? But anyways, he's up there talking about, well, we knew the whole time. And, we because they asked him, like, would your team not participate in the Pop-Tart Bowl? And he's like, well, we never expected to be in that situation, so I can't give you an answer. And it's like, all right, like, let's – and so it's just I've lost a lot of respect for the ACC. I lost a lot of respect for the writer that wanted to go to all the ACC schools and talk to the coaches of teams that played Notre Dame and Miami. What did you think Pat Narduzzi was going to get up there and say? Good things about Notre Dame?
Like, does anyone think that was anyone other than Pat Narduzzi who made those comments about, well, Miami won first of all, Miami won the game, so of course they belong in. Like, does anyone think that wasn't someone other? Like, because they were common opponents that Notre Dame played. The thing is, it's even worse than the social media thing. I was told this yesterday. So have you ever texted someone, maybe kind of talking a little junk about somebody, and like you think that you're texting one person, but you actually accidentally text the person who you're talking junk about? Like, have you ever done one of those?
Oh, yeah. Everyone's done that before.
Right. Well, the ACC did that, but with email. So like
they hit reply all.
Yeah. Yes. So yes. And like, you think you might want to make sure that Notre Dame's not on the CC list if you're sending out, inter office or, like interconference information. If you're going to talk junk about someone, you might want to double check and make sure they're not on the list of recipients of that email. If you're going to send out propaganda to across your conference, you might want to make sure that the team that you're talking about isn't on that list. But that's exactly what happened, straight from the ACC.
I think someone needs to ask Mario Cristobal why they were afraid to come to South Bend 2 years ago. If Notre Dame's an easy
but again,
team.
no one ever brings that up. No one ever brings that up. No one ever asked Miami that question. Hey, how come you bailed on that game when you overscheduled? Hey, ACC, why did you let Miami bail on that game? Because like you're pushing Notre Dame, about this whole Clemson series, and it has to adhere to the conference, the games, the ACC opponents that you've got picked out for Notre Dame. That has to be an extra game on top of that. It's not good enough that's part of the ACC deal. Like we're gonna hold Notre Dame and Clemson to the fire on that, but we've got this conference agreement that 5 ACC teams per year are going to play Notre Dame, and instead of making one of your conference members honor that contract, you let them out and just plug another team in. Like what is that? What is that? Again, like, is Notre Dame part of the relationship or not? Is it the ACC on one side and Notre Dame over here? Because if that's the case, then it's a completely one-sided deal. And what does Notre Dame need any of this for?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what these damages are, and I hope Notre Dame, like you said, does hold their feet to the fire because the ACC deserves it. They deserve. I'm not going to say to be put in their place, but to a degree they do. To a degree they do.
Tyler says he accidentally hit the group chat. Have you ever? I'm sure you've done that. Like you
Yeah.
guys text enough. It's like, has it ever got you in any real hot water?
No, no hot water. Just I think sometimes I've made fun of someone before and forgot that they were in that group chat. So nothing I wouldn't say to them either way, because I'm in. The thing is I'm in group chats with like fantasy football guys, and people like there's certain people where you're like, yeah, we just don't like each other, right? And so he knows I don't like him, and he doesn't like me. But if I said something bad about him, it's not like he hasn't said anything bad about me before.
Sure. I mean, it happens, right? Especially get into the group chat situations. Okay. We'll take a timeout. Rapid fire coming up in hour number 2. I think I'm going to slip one more comment from Pete Bevacqua in as we lead off rapid fire. We got plenty on Jeremiah Love and other Notre Dame football talk and basketball talk as well, for that matter, coming up in hour number 2 and rapid fire. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It is hour number 2, Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com, and that can mean only one thing. It is rapid fire time as we get going here in hour number 2. Heard some comments from Pete Bevacqua in the first hour of the show, and we were talking about the ACC's media campaign against Notre Dame. Bevacqua was asked about Notre Dame's lack of a social media campaign to try to counter some of that and make its own case, again, especially considering the negative campaign that the ACC was waging against Notre Dame. And here's what Bevacqua responded to that.
I mean, I went on a few shows Friday and said, why I believed we've earned every right to be in. Marcus did a few interviews. Everybody has different styles, right? Our style, our approach is look what we're doing on the field. Look at the domination these last 10 weeks. Watch Jeremiah Love, watch Kadarian Price, watch Leonard Moore, watch Adon Schuler. Look at the development and the maturation of CJ Carr, going from somebody who's never played to, in my opinion, being one of a handful of the very, very best quarterbacks in college football. It was kind of like, hey, if you have this proof on the field, what am I going to say that's going to add to that?
All right, so that's what Pete Bevacqua had to say. Do you think they needed to do more, Jesse? And if so, what would it have looked like?
I kind of was under the impression too, some people seem to be criticizing them that they didn't do their own, I guess, platform or campaign. And it's like, why should you have to do that when it's the literal jobs committee just to get in a room, watch football, and, figure out the things? Like it shouldn't take politicking, campaigning, putting on the Miami and Notre Dame game for 2 days straight. Like it's just, my understanding is each team, makes a presentation to the committee every week. They you get to meet with the committee, you get to present kind of the facts in your case and those sort of things. And all the feedback that they were getting is that, what the committee was doing for the first 3 or 4 weeks. And so I don't see any reason to do it. It seemed like the committee really had this, plan, agenda the last few weeks, and it was going to be executed regardless. If we were, as Notre Dame fans, as soon as Alabama jumped Notre Dame in that ranking, the penultimate ranking, Notre Dame fans should have just known at that point, because the more I go back and do the math and figure out the situations, it's like that was the ultimate indicator, because if BYU won, they were going to jump. If Alabama lost, clearly they weren't going to move, and now Miami was going to jump.
Which is still crazy that that Alabama did not drop at all. But it was obvious that, like you talked about Nick Saban, and I think that things, again, like with this barrage of everyone coming at the Notre Dame Miami head-to-head, all of a sudden, Nick Saban here's, Notre Dame and Alabama are being compared. And you talked in the first hour of the show about how all of a sudden from 1 week to the next, Notre Dame was very complimentary of Notre Dame, but then he found out that Notre Dame was being compared to Alabama. And, then he starts taking his shots at Notre Dame last weekend, going into the selection process, the day before on game day, conference championship Saturday, and all that kind of stuff. I feel like, I said this yesterday, it just feels like the whiners won. And all, that, like, whether it was the ACC and its social media campaign or looping the Notre Dame Miami game on the ACC network, we don't know ultimately how much direct effect that had on the committee. You've also got the fact that Hunter Yurachek, he wasn't even the playoff committee chairman when this thing started. Like it's like hardly anyone has even talked about the fact that when the whole, when the first rankings were released, the Baylor athletic director was the committee chairman, and he was on there for 2 weeks, and then he gets booted at his own school, so he has to step down from the playoff committee. And now all of a sudden, you've got an SEC athletic director. An SEC team, an extra SEC team ends up making it into the field after they were the one who was left out last year. Like you add a lot of different things up. I think that at the very least, though, like, did Pete Bevacqua and Marcus Freeman need to be doing a bunch of interviews and going out there trying to drown out all the noise? No, because Notre Dame was in the lead for so long and they thought that they were like, why did they need to take unnecessary shots and play on the defensive when they were the team, that was the leader in the clubhouse going into the final couple of weeks before everything changed? But at the very least, I feel like from a social media perspective, like you didn't even necessarily have to compare yourself to Miami or Alabama or whoever it was, but you could have put out like your metrics and just emphasized how well you're showing in all these different metrics week in and week out, that kind of stuff. But again, like how much ultimate effect that really had on the committee, I don't know. I think it was negligible, but I do think that all the narrative coming out of ESPN and every broadcast that you tuned into and all these different things, I think that ultimately did play a part. And as you said, going into that, the week before the Tuesday before the last ranking, the writing was obviously on the wall the way it played out.
Yeah, and it's super unfortunate because, we kind of hammered down on the ACC. I thought another, stupid decision that they did is allowing Duke to play for the conference championship. Because if you just put Miami in there, Miami wins the game, they get the auto bid, Bama stays in, and then likely Notre Dame keeps that last spot because, the power or the group of 5 team, James Madison gets booted out for Miami's spot. Miami's in, Alabama's in, Notre Dame's in, everybody's happy. But since the ACC wanted to be stubborn and made, 7-5 crappy Duke go out there and play Virginia, oh, by the way, the winner doesn't get in, and Miami, the team that couldn't even make it to that stink conference championship game, gets rewarded for sitting at home and not having to play in the conference championship game. So
I'd be surprised if the ACC doesn't make some kind of change, because all you have to do is have a stipulation in there that says the conference reserves the right to put the highest ranked team in the conference championship game, in a tiebreaker situation like that. Like all you got to do is make that the number one tiebreaker and that settles everything. But it's like you can blame the ACC for that, and they're at least partly culpable because they didn't have the foresight to have that kind of tiebreaker in there to begin with. But it's still a knock on Miami that like they weren't even good enough to get into that conference championship game. And if they did get into the conference championship game, then instead of James Madison getting that second group of 5 bid, the ACC would have gotten a bid, which also would have left another spot open for Notre Dame. If Miami had just taken care of its own business and been able to get into its own conference championship game, since everyone wants to talk about how important conferences and conference championship games are.
Yeah, and It's like, oh, wait, the team that got the last spot didn't go to the conference championship or win the conference championship, but please tell me why Notre Dame belongs in a conference.
Right. Exactly. So a lot of questions about who was typing at the press conference. I have no idea. And I texted the person who I thought it might be. I said, hey, did you have your computer with you at the press conference today? He said no. So it was not him. And he has the notoriously loud fingers himself, but it was not him. But I don't know who it was. I have to say, I didn't notice it nearly as much while the press conference was going on. But man, every soundbite that we've played, there's just like someone is attacking that keyboard, like their life is on the line out there. I think some people have said it was someone who took typing lessons on an old school typewriter back in the day, which would put them into my age demographic, but which the person who I texted is, but everyone else was a little bit younger at least. But I assume it was a front row person because the microphone was picking it up so much, though. I don't know.
Rumor has it was you.
DK says it was me. I did not have my laptop with me today. So Okay, Paul Feinbaum and Josh Pate were both on Get Up this morning.
Boy.
Both of them said Notre Dame comes out of all of this over the last 48 hours-ish looking bad. So scale of 1 to 10, how bad a look do you think these last couple of days have been from Notre Dame from a national perspective?
I would put it as an 8 out of 10. And that doesn't even factor in the bowl game for me. The bowl game, I don't think is a bad look. I think everyone's going to make fun of you. I think the people with rational brains are going to say, oh, yeah, why would Notre Dame get used by a company and then allow the company to use them even more and profit off them in a bowl game? And so I think, though, just the embarrassment from, I think people want to make fun of Notre Dame because they really thought they had a chance the whole time type narrative. And then for it to all blow up in their face and everyone to, again, have their way with Notre Dame and all these different, wounds that people want to open up about Notre Dame. For me, it's a solid 8 out of 10. It's not a good situation to be a Notre Dame fan right now.
Yeah, and I'm curious that you're not factoring in the bowl game, because I think the bowl game is what most people are jumping on. And like I'm curious to see coming out of today. I've seen some tweets and stuff like that. Like, does today's press conference just make Notre Dame stick in this news cycle for a day or two longer? Like, are people going to continue to talk about it? A lot of the stuff, most of the stuff that he talked about today was just follow-ups to stuff that he talked about yesterday, on the Dan Patrick show. I mean, I think it's an 8, because look, it's not just these two guys. They're reflective of, I think the larger narrative. Now, I will say Heather Dinich was also on that show, and she did not voice, her same outrage as Feinbaum and Pate, and Feinbaum has obviously come out hot like he always does. And I saw someone say, who listens to them? Well, at least in SEC country, a lot of people listen to Paul Feinbaum, and they did. He is a guy who, they gave a radio guy a TV show on the SEC network. So there's, pretty wide distribution. There's a lot of people who talk to him. He is one of the go-to guys in terms of college football on that network. But I just, it's hard to get around. Like, again, I completely have no problem with Notre Dame turning down the bowl invitation. But I think an extra day, an extra day of this with, the veiled talk about the ACC and some different things like that from Pete Bevacqua, I don't think it does anything to quell some of this talk. I think really now, the whole any publicity is good publicity. I don't know if I subscribe to that in this aspect. I think Notre Dame just needs some time to get away from this and just like stop talking. And at some point, maybe you announce a contract extension with Marcus Freeman because signing day is already gone, and you start picking up some guys in the transfer portal once that happens about a month from now. And I think that, things start going back in another direction. Like, there's not going to be, like, right now, the immediacy of this makes it even worse. So right now, I do think it is pretty loud and glaring, like you had Wilbon yesterday as well, going off. But, like, there's a guy who's obviously biased because he said in part of his comments on PTI that he hates Notre Dame. He has always hated Notre Dame. He's a Northwestern guy. He's always hated Notre Dame. He's always hated Michigan. So at least, his hate is fairly widespread. But all this has done really is give anyone who has any kind of distaste for Notre Dame just a chance to say, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
You're better than everybody else. You think you're better than me? That's what it's done.
I completely agree. So I think what you're saying is we should just, really talk about the safety commit that Notre Dame got today over Alabama. And
are you ready to break him down? You going to go a little whiteboard on the commit?
No, but I do agree with what you're saying. I think Notre Dame, they did all of this in a span of like 24 hours. With the selection show, with the no bowl game, and then Pete Bevacqua and Dan Patrick, and then more comments today. It's like At what point do we just let this thing breathe for a little bit? We take the microphone away. If you're George Pickens, we take the phone away after the game so you can't go on Instagram and talk about Richard Sherman for running his mouth. Like, at some point, you just got to take it all away and say, you know what? We're just going to chill, or maybe. And I wanted to bring this up. What is he said in one of the cuts that they were going to do something tomorrow. Like the players were, he said, like they're going to let their hair down
Oh,
or
they
something.
needed to have some fun or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you know what that is?
I don't know what the fun was because, I mean, these press conferences, like you've watched enough Marcus Freeman press conferences, and the format is the same. You go around, everyone gets, as they say, one question and one follow-up. And, so like that was, you don't get chances to ask those questions, basically. Was interesting, though, that this was supposed to be, as they said at the beginning of the press conference, a chance for the local media to have their time with Pete Bevacqua and get to ask questions. But a national guy shows up and raises his hand, because usually what happens at these press conferences, the format is simple. You want to talk, you raise your hand, and they put you on a list, and they get to you in order. Well, the national guy shows up, not a local guy. So, outside of the protocol that they explained, national guy puts up his hand after several local guys had put their hand up, yet he got to ask the second question of the press conference. So thought that was interesting.
Who was running that dang thing?
Yeah, well, is what it is. But yes. Stymie asked this earlier, and I didn't see it. He said, would the women's team enjoy being in a conference with UConn, or would they rather avoid that fight? Well, they're playing UConn. They've been playing UConn non-conference. I think it's 4 years straight now. This will be the fourth year. It's either the fourth or the fifth year. This is year 6 of Neil Ivey. So they used to be in a conference, obviously, with UConn, and there were some great battles between Notre Dame and UConn back in the old Big East days. I don't think women's basketball would, mind having them there, because that's one less game that you have to go out and schedule because you'd already be in a conference. And so that would be taken care of.
I like the tradition of playing UConn. I know you said over the last few years they have been, when they obviously were regular Big East members, they'd play each other twice a season. And it felt like, Final Four previews, Elite Eight previews, national championship previews. So, I don't think Notre Dame would shy away from playing UConn. I think that's basically the crux of what that question was. I think both of those teams enjoy that kind of rivalry, because I still don't think there's a rivalry there.
And I had Neil Ivey on before the basketball season started, end of October, and I asked her about the importance of the UConn rivalry, and she said as long as she's there is complete openness from both sides to continue to play that as long as possible. There's never been any, butting of heads on that. I think it's kind of like when Notre Dame and USC play in football. When it's a home Notre Dame game on the women's basketball side, it's in December. That's the way it's been the last few years. And when it's a UConn home game, it ends up in January, and it'll be on MLK Day this year. So, yeah, I think that they would fully embrace that if it came to that. We'll take a timeout. When we come back, more rapid fire, more Notre Dame football talk in rapid fire as we continue Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Rapid fire as we continue the show. Sean Stiers along with Jesse Stiers. Saw Mike Berardino just tweeted this, talking about the bowl game and the decision not to play in the bowl game. Berardino tweeted a list of players who might not have been available due to either injury or opt-out for the bowl game. Here is the list. Because now remember, this would have been the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Do you think Jeremiah Love, after bruising his ribs, was going to risk injury in the Pop-Tarts Bowl and play again? I would say highly doubtful.
Nope.
Love is at the top of the list. Jadarian Price, Will Pauling, Malachi Fields, Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, Eli Raridan, Billy Schrouth, Emil Wagner, Adon Schuler, Jalen Stroman, Devontae Smith, Junior Tui Alamaka, Jordan Botelho, Jason Onye, Gabe Rubio, Jared Dawson, Donovan Heinisch, Josh Burnham, Boubacar Traore, Jalen Sneed, Kingston Viliamu Asa, Drake Bowen, and Johnson. Who's Johnson? Off the top of my head.
Tay Johnson?
Tay Johnson. Thank you. Yes. I don't know why his first name wasn't coming to me.
I mean, that's a whole starting team right there. That's a spring unit right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And majority of those guys are first string guys.
Right. Right. But all these people around the country think that Notre Dame is supposed to entertain them, and by not playing in this meaningless exhibition game that somehow taints what Notre Dame is as a program and who they are, from their leadership on down to their team. But they're supposed to risk all that. So Adon is not definitely going to the NFL. We don't know. That is just a list of people who potentially wouldn't have been available, just depending on what kind of decisions they would make, whether it's injury or otherwise. But that's yeah, I mean, that whole list, there probably would have been a few who would have still been available, but that is a list of guys who potentially wouldn't have been available for different reasons. And a lot of those guys have had injuries, like Jaden Greathouse. After Jaden Greathouse was injured all season, why would he come back and risk more injury in a meaningless exhibition game in Orlando, Florida? There's no reason to.
Yeah, there's no reason for a lot of those guys. And that's the thing, too, is Notre Dame needed to get healthy along the offensive line, the defensive line, and the secondary at wide receiver. And that's why, I'll come back to, I don't think that this is the worst thing in the world that Notre Dame giving their calendar year, the deep run they made last year, going into this season, some injuries that they experienced along the way. I think this is just a good time to reset, refresh, get healthy, get into the weight room, get a jump start on strength and conditioning. You come back quicker, stronger, and ticked off next season.
I think so too. B. Tomey, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that. Thought Schuler was a sophomore, had one more year before the NFL. He is a sophomore eligibility-wise, but this was his third season, so he can declare for the NFL this year if he decides to do that. That's a decision that he'll have to make. So, because he did have a redshirt year, and this is just his second year playing. Jeremiah Love is a Heisman Trophy finalist, is just making it to New York for the ceremony, a win for Jeremiah Love.
Preseason, I would have said yes, but and it still is a win. But to me, when you start comparing these quarterbacks to, past previous winners, it's like they're just not impressive. They're not impressive. You can't sell me on guys who are throwing for 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns when I've seen 4,000 yards and 40 touchdown seasons. And I'm supposed to believe that this guy's a Heisman. No, you just happen to play quarterback on, one of the better teams in the country. If we're talking about pure game-changing, dynamic, thunder or lightning in a bottle type plays, that's Jeremiah Love. And so considering who the Final Four are, I don't think just being there is good enough anymore. I think there's a good chance to run the table. Why not?
Honestly, I think that the guy who, of the quarterbacks who were there, there are three quarterbacks in Jeremiah Love. You've got Sayin, you've got Pavia, you've got Mendoza, and you've got Jeremiah Love. I think the most deserving of the three quarterbacks is Pavia. Like, I think that he has played his way into being a Heisman Trophy finalist. I like the other two they played nice football, but they're part of they're basically the stereotypical good quarterback on great team.
They're just on a
becomes a
well-oiled
Heisman
machine.
Trophy finalist. Yeah.
I'm supposed to believe that those guys are the best guys. And then, let's not also forget Jeremiah Love is splitting carries with another guy who's probably going to play running back in the NFL. So I just think Notre Dame needs to highlight. If Notre Dame's going to go on a social media run, this is the run they need to go on. You need to keep posting highlights of Jeremiah Love. You need to keep posting his cumulative yards, because I saw the stupid graphic ESPN put up with just his rushing yards.
Today is the deadline. Today is the deadline for Heisman Trophy voters. So, like, if they're going to do the social media blitz, it needs to happen right now. Yeah. But that's, like all the highlights, all the big runs. And that's really, like, for Jeremiah Love personally, the way things turned out, because obviously Notre Dame was going to get left out of the playoff, regardless of what happened in that Stanford game that ended at around 2 a.m. But the way it turns out now is, what the other unfortunate side effect of all this is that Love suffered that injury in the first quarter. He had like 60 yards, or I think like almost all of his yards was on that opening drive. And if Jeremiah Love even had a full half plus a little bit more to be fully healthy and go out there and show what he could do, like, he would have had the chance to make a couple, like, his final true Heisman closing argument. Like, you would have seen another one of those signature long touchdown runs from Jeremiah Love. And that's what he missed by being knocked out of that game. Obviously, bigger picture, the team being in the playoff is a more important thing. But for Love's Heisman candidacy, that's where he really missed out, was by not being able to do that, make his final case. Johnny asks when the Heisman show is. It'll be Saturday night. We got the Army-Navy game coming up this weekend. And then we've got the Heisman ceremony Saturday night. Oh, Brent says, imagine Jeremiah Love and a Mike Shanahan offense. No thanks, Brent. I will not picture Jeremiah Love. Thank you. In a Shanahan offense. I will not do that. Scale of 1 to 10. What chance do you give Love to actually win the Heisman?
The fan of me wants to say like an 8 out of 10. I think realistically this is like a solid 3 out of 10. I think this award, unfortunately, is just going to go to probably the best quarterback on the best team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mendoza wins this.
I think so as well. I'd probably put it maybe a little bit higher than yours at a 3, but I think it feels like Indiana's the number 1 team in the nation. Mendoza's the quarterback of that team. He just beat Ohio State. There were a lot of people saying that Mendoza made his final statement for Heisman, even though that game, again, okay, stats are for losers, but, he made a big play at the end of the game when he needed to. Does that make him the most outstanding player in college football? No, it just makes him the best quarterback on a really good team. Jeremiah Love is the best player in college football. There's even a case, I think, for Rodriguez. The Rodriguez, the linebacker from Texas Tech, is like the better overall player, but he's a linebacker. When's the last time a linebacker made it to New York? 2012.
The last time a Notre Dame guy made it.
It's amazing that Jeremiah Love, in the last 13 years, this is the first Notre Dame Heisman Trophy finalist since Manti Te'o. It's amazing.
Kind of sad.
I give him a 3. Unfortunately, I think we all think he's the best player in college football, but I just think one of these quarterbacks is going to ultimately win it. And I agree with you. I think that Mendoza, and the fact that there are 4 guys there, that means the votes, because there can either be 3 or 4. And when 4 show up, that means the voting was close enough to get all 4. Maybe that favors Love a little bit, because that means the votes were split, and maybe it's not a complete landslide. But unfortunately, I don't think again, I think lacking that closing argument in that last weekend against Stanford is going to be what probably ends up costing him.
Yeah, and I bet those idiots will say, "Oh well, Jeremiah Love only racked up stats against the bad teams," but you know.
So Antoine says, thoughts on Riley Leonard being the Colts starting quarterback. Also, didn't he train with Phillip Rivers? He did. And the Colts just announced today that they have brought back Phillip Rivers. They are bringing Phillip Rivers out of retirement at 44 years old because Riley Leonard hurt his knee last week. And so Phillip Rivers, who hasn't played in 5 years, is coming out of retirement to rejoin the Indianapolis Colts. That's how desperate they are right now to
there's got to be someone better
push.
than a guy that's been out of the league for 5 years and that's 44 years old, right? Like there's got to be a better option. And who does he have in the Colts back pocket? Because I feel like every time the Colts have been, looking for a new quarterback, his name comes up.
They should have been begging the Bengals to release Joe Flacco so they could try.
That's what I thought. I was like, oh, where's Joe Flacco at right now?
That's right. Because the trade deadline has passed, so you can't even do that. Man,
why not go after like Cooper Rush on Baltimore?
Well, again, the trade deadline has passed, so you can't.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So, yeah. Yep.
It's crazy that the Colts have Daniel Jones, Riley Leonard, and Anthony Richardson all hurt right now.
Yep, I know. Fill in the blank. It's blank that for the first time in Micah Shrewsbury's Notre Dame tenure, the Fighting Irish men's basketball team received votes in this week's Associated Press poll.
It's about dang time that Micah Shrewsbury and the boys started, climbing in that uphill battle and getting some AP votes. But of course, it comes in the same week that it's announced that Marcus Burton, has some sort of ankle surgery. And is going to be out for an undisclosed amount of time. But to make light of the situation, I really like the way that Harlison plays and the way that he played down the stretch against TCU to win that game for Notre Dame. I think some of the, like Serta is starting to come along. I think some of these younger guys are really starting to – that young talent that we've been waiting for, I think is starting to rapidly, play well together.
And I think that them at least getting some votes, I mean, it's progress. They're finally making progress, and you're finally starting to see some of this come to fruition with more talent on the roster. The fact that they were able to go out in the transfer portal and get a guy like Tout to help augment what they've got, and then Harrelson, like you talked about as well, playing very well. So it's a good sign. Unfortunately, the other fill in the blank is it's blank that Notre Dame announced today that Burton will have surgery on his injured left ankle on Wednesday, and there is no timetable for return.
Yeah, it's tragic because as soon as Notre Dame kind of, you're starting to see the horizon, you're starting to see, some of the glimpses of playing good basketball, kind of getting yourself out of this rut, immediately something bad happens. And you just wish or hope that, Burton can come back as quickly as possible, potentially help this team, down the stretch later in the season as ACC play or maybe even a national, tournament appearance comes about. So just unfortunate because this isn't the first time, he's dealt with the injuries.
Yeah, I know. And it's, again, like you just start to make some progress and then your best player, something like this happens. Hopefully, it doesn't sound too good when you hear ankle surgery and the fact that there's no timetable for a return. Hopefully it's sooner than later, but not a very good sign for Marcus Burton. And hopefully, I'm really curious to see how the rest of these guys come together now as they're getting ready for the start of ACC play. That is on the horizon now because we've got, it's almost middle of December now. We're past the first week of December. We're only a couple of weeks away from Christmas, and conference play is going to be starting and everything else. So we'll see who's able, if they're able to pick up the slack and kind of keep pushing forward without him. Hopefully he's not out for too long. Hopefully he recovers. Like that's obviously the most important thing, but hopefully the team is able to continue to push forward as well. We'll take our final timeout and then back to wrap things up. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Winding down Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Wake Up the Echoes coming up here in a little bit on Sports Radio WSBT. We've got about 8 minutes or so left here. Jess, Kirk Herbstreit says it's time to do away with the college football playoff Tuesday night reveals show. In or out on that?
Yeah, this is a big out for me. I think that the shows are fine as long as you're not misleading. And I think, no, seriously, I don't like, okay, let's say, everything is flipped and they just do one final releasing the day after the conference championships. Then everyone's just going to moan and groan. Well, how did you get to these final answers? How did nothing lead up to, these one-time rankings? And so maybe not as many, but Kirk's just trying to cover up the fact that ESPN wanted to, and the committee wanted to be dishonest the entire time. That's why he's saying
that's
this.
True.
And it's just a cover up for their own mistakes, their own allegiance and bias. And so, I just don't think that they should be let off the hook like that. And I think the fans and the programs deserve kind of their standing before just one final initial ranking.
Yeah, I would agree with what Robert is saying here in the chat. Do 4 weeks instead of 6 or even 3 weeks. Like I could see it. Like I don't think you need to do it the Tuesday before the Sunday reveal. I think that's a little bit quick. I think you could do at least 2 or 3 shows to start to put one out. I've heard other people say just kind of do what, the NCAA tournament does for men's and women's basketball, and you've got where they do, I think what is it, the top 16 reveal where they let you know like who, what's shaping up, who the top, seeds would be at this point. Maybe you do like one show a month out and then you do a final show or something like that.
Every 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah. Like maybe you don't need to do it every week, but like Herb Street can say this and I guess it goes against the company, stance on what they're doing, but it is part of the ESPN contract that they do these reveal shows. Like ESPN is completely fine with it. And that's, to me, that's why all of this became the talking point that it was. Because as I've said before, there was no other controversy in the top 12 every week. There was no controversy other than Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Miami in spite of the head-to-head win that Miami had. So because of that, that was their talk. That was Reese Davis and ESPN's talking point every week. Why is Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami? How does Miami make up the great, like what's it going to take? When's the head-to-head going to come into it? Like that became the entire talking point. And then last Tuesday, it's already been a week ago, the fact that Alabama moved ahead of Notre Dame, that at least moved that into part of the conversation. But the main talking point, the main controversy that they had to go with every week was that Notre Dame Miami thing. And that's a big part of why all of this just continued to blow up and grow legs over the last 5 weeks, because that's all they had to cling to. There was nothing else they could talk about. And so that was one of the first questions that Reese Davis asked every week. I'm not blaming Reese Davis, for it, but that's just like, that's part of it. That's the way it goes. That's what you've got to talk about. And so that blew it up. So I agree. I don't think you've got to do away with it completely, but you need a more transparent committee that at least on the surface level shows more honesty than what they had, because week after week, they kept saying that Notre Dame was the better team than Miami. And in spite of the fact that Notre Dame continued to excel at a very high level week after week and stay ahead of Miami, they waited until Sunday, the last day, when the final rankings came out. In spite of the fact that neither team had played in more than a week, all of a sudden, Miami vaults Notre Dame. And, again, like that goes back to the crux of Pete Bevacqua's argument, the rug being pulled out from underneath Notre Dame. It's not the fact that Notre Dame didn't get in as much as it is you were telling us this week after week after week, and then when it actually counted, you went with something different, and Notre Dame was on the outside looking in.
Yeah, completely agree.
We were talking about unavailable players, and Robert said in the YouTube chat, Jagassaw will not go into the draft. He hasn't played enough. Yeah, I would be completely shocked, even though this was year 3 for Charles Jagassaw. Obviously, he's been injured the last 2 years. Like there's not enough for him out there, for NFL teams to have enough interest in drafting him at this point. Do you think?
No, he doesn't have enough of a resume and the consistency. Obviously, he's got a makeup and a build, but he's got to stay on the field and he's got to play at a high level for an entire season.
Dick Vitale and Charles Barkley are going to team up with play-by-play man Dave O'Brien to call this Saturday's college basketball game between Kentucky and Indiana. And then Vitale and Barkley are also going to be paired up again for an NCAA tournament game in March. Rate this move on a scale of 1 to 10.
This is a huge 10 out of 10 for me. Absolute home run. When you're talking about big personalities in basketball and in sports, Dick Vitale and Charles Barkley are up there. I think Charles Barkley, anytime he's associated with anything basketball, he knocks it out. And especially with the college level, I do think it's a bit more serious for him. It's not like the NBA, where he's constantly kind of joking around. I do think he takes it a little bit more seriously. But But, combining, again, those two personalities, getting them to listening to them, talk about basketball, it's a big 10 out of 10 for me.
I agree. Complete 10. And like Vitale, for all that he has done in college basketball and for college basketball, he's never been able to call an NCAA tournament game because he works for ESPN, and obviously the games are not on ESPN. But they're doing this. This is part of the inside the NBA, I think, because Barkley still works for TNT, and ESPN is licensing that show. So Barkley is going to pair up. It's going to be an ESPN platform game with Vitale and Barkley this week, and then the NCAA tournament game will be on one of the Warner Brothers channels, whether it's CBS or TNT or TBS or True or whatever, during the tournament. So I think it's going to be really cool to have two iconic names and guys and personalities in the world of basketball teaming up for a game like this. And I think O'Brien is a good play-by-play guy to match him up as well, because I think he's got the personality to be able to, for them all to be able to play off, and he'll know when to lay out, because there's a lot of personality that's going to be on that team.
Who do you think we will have a harder time understanding, Dick Vitale or Charles Barkley?
Might be Vitale, just because I don't know with his health and stuff like that exactly what he's going to sound like. Brent tried to slip in a question at the end of the show. It's mailbag day tomorrow, so be ready and we'll answer your questions then. Jesse, enjoyed it as always. I will talk to you tomorrow. Wake Up the Echo is coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.